Caucasian. White-skinned, of European origin. A white person, a person of European origin. A person from the Caucasus. Today, we use this word in the context of the first two definitions I read. It should only be used for the latter. Let me get into that. You see, the word Caucasian can be brought back to the theory of race itself. Throughout history, the word Caucasian was the epicenter of racial superiority, particularly to whites. Let's look back into history. German anthropologist Johann Blumenbach was walking through Georgia, the country, when he saw a skull. He noted that this skull was very proportional and symmetrical. Blumenbach believed these people of the southern slope of the Caucasus Mountains were God's ideal people. He compared this Caucasian skull with an Ethiopian female skull. The skull was elongated in the front, and Blumenbach liked the Georgian skull more. Next, he compared the Caucasian skull with a skull from a reindeer tungus, most likely from China. This skull was elongated outwards. From a purely aesthetic point of view, the Caucasian skull was the nicest. Blumenbach believed that the Caucasian skull was the skull God constructed, and other skulls diverged from that example skull, meaning that humans originated from the Caucasus Mountains. Blumenbach actually had minimal prejudice against African people, especially for his time. He opposed slavery and believed in the intelligence of Africans. According to Rajgopal, Blumenbach refuted the notion that Ethiopians were inferior to other races. Blumenbach wrote favorably about Negroes, extolling their beauty, mental abilities, and achievements in literature and other fields. He pointed to variations in opportunity as the cause of differences. His viewpoint on Africans was out of tune with that of the times and more in line with what was seen during the movements for civil rights and equality in the 1960s. Blumenbach stated that the first color of mankind was white, as it is possible to turn from white to black, but not black to white. Further scientific studies have determined that this statement is incorrect. Blumenbach determined that all humans were one species, no matter the skull shape and skin tone. Before Blumenbach's discovery, it was widely believed that people were different products of different human and animal matings. Continuing the skull theory, American scientist Samuel Morton measured the skulls of different races to prove cranial capacity. He was biased towards his assumptions and ended up concluding that the Caucasian people had the highest mental capacity compared to any other race. The word Caucasian is essentially the outcome of a pseudoscientific belief where a white person of European origin, the majority of Americans today, dominates all other races. One way racial differences were defined was through craniometrics, which measured skull size to determine the intelligence of each racial group. As you can imagine, this flawed application of the scientific method resulted in race scientists developing a flawed system of racial classification that ranked the 5 races from most primitive, black and brown races, to more advanced, the Asian races, to the most advanced, the white or Caucasian races. Even though the 5-race topology was later disproven, Caucasian still has currency in the U.S. Samuel Morton's discoveries were picked up by slavery-supporting scientists. Pro-slavery scientist Josiah Nott stated, "Nations and races, like individuals, have each an especial destiny. Some are born to rule and others to be ruled. No two distinctly marked races can dwell together on equal terms." Essentially, this is what created the notion of white superiority over other races, which ended up being the beginning of the Eugenics movement. We're going to learn about that now. The term eugenics means well-born. It was first used by Sir Francis Galton, one of Charles Darwin's cousins, in 1883. Galton believed that humans could be bred just like how we breed animals today. We find many quality traits of a male and a female and breed them together, which usually creates offspring with similar good qualities. Instead of trying to produce children with desired traits in the U.S., eugenicists look to stop the spread of undesired traits throughout generations. To eugenicists at the time, sterilization was the most logical solution to stop the spread of undesirables. Undesirables could be mentally ill people, blind people, deaf people, poor people, people with a criminal record, people with alcoholism, etc. In some cases, African women were sterilized by doctors during medical operations without their consent. Adolf Hitler was perhaps the most well-known adopter of eugenics. Nazis sterilized hundreds of thousands of people who were labeled as medically unfit and inferior and killed tens of thousands of disabled people. He also assimilated the Jewish population of many European countries. I know what you're asking right now. What does this have to do with the word Caucasian? Well, to recap my lesson, the word Caucasian was used as the racial classification for the people Blumenbach thought were God's original creation. The skull he found was in Georgia, the country, which is on the southern tip of the Caucasus Mountains. Georgian people have white skin tones, similar to those who originate from most of Europe, meaning it was most likely inferred that white-skinned Europeans were God's ideal creation as well. Race scientist Samuel Morton took this a step further, labeling Caucasian skulls as the most intelligent. Like all North Americans with ancestry tracing back to Europe, Samuel Morton was considered Caucasian. The eugenics movement in America aimed to rid Americans of undesirable traits. If you weren't considered Caucasian at the time, you had a chance of becoming sterilized, because being a minority was considered being undesirable in America. As you could see, the word Caucasian was thrown around multiple times. What once labeled people from a small region near the Caucasus Mountains is now the name of a race comprising the majority of America and Europe.